We have Emmeline Kuhn, Senior Director of Global Operations and the Technology Practice at Leithwaite. Vince Marin, the Global Chief Information Officer at Sidley Austin. Charles Sims, the Chief Technology Officer at the United Talent Agency. Elise Smith, the co-founder and CEO of Praxis Labs. And Adam Wenchel, co-founder and CEO of Arthur AI. Jamie Heller, our business editor, is going to lead the first couple of questions, and I'll be sitting down here in the audience and roaming around with this handheld mic. So, as I say, please do think about the questions you would like to put to the group. Jamie, over to you.
Good morning, everyone. Yesterday, Vinod Khosla made a very fascinating point to me about the future of work, which is his point was not that important. AI is going to hugely increase GDP globally. There'll be plenty of money to go around, and people won't have to work. Well, when that came up with Sam Altman last night, he said, whoa, work matters. This is a real issue with the advent of AI, what it's going to mean for people's ability to participate in society through work. So I'd like to just start with that. Where do people agree, disagree, somewhere some down in between? Do you want to start, Elise?
Yeah, I think when we think about the future of work, we have to think about the full population that we're trying to serve, everyone from the boardroom, the retail floor, and the warehouse, and how their roles, how their lives, how their communities change. And so oftentimes when we think about the advent of AI and the impact it's going to have, we need to be considering what types of skills are we actually building into our workforces for the future, regardless of what changes bring, because we can't predict everything. And so I've been working with a lot of our clients, a lot of executives around what is the skills first mentality just across the whole organization, from human skills to technical skills to the types of skills that will be needed for that next generation. And one of the biggest ones where a lot of our clients are focusing on is just being able to adopt and being able to build the human skill of adaptability and within teams, within leaders, so that we're able to kind of address whatever comes our way.
Yeah, I mean, and just to jump in there, I think Khosla had a really good point of, if you're talking to a college student today, it's about generalization. It's about trying to learn as many things as you can and learn to learn almost. How do you learn to adopt, learn to be able to bring these pieces together? And whenever I'm talking about the most advantageous pieces of AI, the people who are going to be if you take a construction site, it's the general contractor, the one who can translate, the one who can utilize all the specialties, since AI will replace a lot of the really specific specialties, and the generalist who can move between them is really, really important.
I just want to challenge that, just to say how broadly provocative this whole few days has been, is Vinod did make that point, be broad, but then Renee Haas of ARM said he doesn't have enough people who can work on circuits and chips, and the folks who worked at Google and Facebook are not really right match for him. So it's really fascinating how some people are saying go broad, and then you really need very specific. Go ahead, Vince.
One of the firms that I used to be associated with previously, if I mention the name, most of you will know McKinsey. The emphasis there is when it comes to developing skills and specialization, the model is a T-based model, meaning be a generalist in as many areas as you can, but always have an area of specialization and expertise that really makes you stand out. And it looks like that is coming back into the conversation from what Vinod was saying.
Anyone in the audience want to jump in on this?
Yeah, no, just to back up. No, go ahead. Back up Vince's point. Vinod did say be very broad, but then he went on to tell the story about how he had gotten a PhD in electrical engineering, and so it's like, to your point, like he had a very deep knowledge, and that learning to learn is not synonymous with breadth. It can be, very deep in an area as well.
And I think beyond learning to learn, I think there are skills that we know, regardless of what happens in the future, we will need. It's collaboration, it's communication, it's working across difference, because our workforces will continue to be diverse spaces. And so how do we build those muscles too, while we're also thinking about the specialization skills or the broad-based generalization skills?
Yep.
And I think that adaptability word is a really important word because I think what we're talking about right now is here today and what's going to happen in several years from now. So right now there's a lot of new jobs, like a prompt engineer is a completely new job, and a manager of AI, which is sort of a transformational role within corporates, or looking how we're going to transform. So a head of transformation role is very focused on AI now within a lot of corporates. So these are new. These are brand new roles. And that means there's going to be other brand new roles that come up. And that's why breadth is important, but adaptability even more so.
So I'd like to ask a quick question. Thank you. Sorry. I didn't think I was ever going to get a chance. So my name is Amber Malone. I'm from Generac Power Systems. And we spend a lot of time as intelligent, driven, focused people embracing tech, talking about how other driven, focused people on our teams are going to embrace this tech. But what do you think about all of the people that we have working in our manufacturing sites? People who want to just come in, clock out, right? Serve their families. They don't necessarily want a more complicated role or a more interesting role or all of these things that everyone is talking about AI freeing you up to do. What are we going to do to help manage that change in our businesses and make sure that we're bringing our whole teams along in this journey?
I mean, I would say we saw this with manufacturing many years ago, whether it's in the Rust Belt, and we thought we're going to automate all of these different manufacturings with robots, and we saw, in my opinion, some of the disservice that we weren't able to bring that blue collar worker and re-educate them and reintegrate them into a different role. But I think with AI, there is this scariness that we don't know because it's changing so quickly that, yes, it's great to say, oh, well, there's going to be universal basic income and we're going to have money, all the money to go around, and you're going to be able to do whatever passion you want. But in reality, I think it's going to be more, there's going to be different roles that they will be interested in. Or can we use AI to take away the things that they do dislike about their job, the repetitiveness, the every accountant I've ever met, there's a number of things that they hate doing every day that is part of their job that AI could take care of. That doesn't mean it takes their entire job away. It takes away the stuff that they dislike. And as leaders, it's also important to, I think, embrace that agency. That's where Sam was mentioning of, we as humans need to have agency. It's not just take everything. We all have the same amount of income and we can do whatever passions we want. It's trying to have something that you're proud of or have something that you're going to work every single day. Maybe AI is going to be able to more broadly be able to take away the frustrations of those folks.
I would, in addition to everything that Charles is saying, very plainly admit that most of us are very focused on trying to figure out what all of this means to our businesses and how we can gain the competitive edge and so on. But clearly there is a lot more work that needs to be done to address what you are asking, Amber. I think our colleague from the Port of Long Beach articulated it very well the other night. Clearly there is the majority of the population that probably doesn't even know what we are talking about. And trying to message this appropriately to them, help them to understand all of this. And then we as the leaders at the forefront of all of this, trying to think through how to manage all of this transition, I think is going to be one of our biggest contributions to the society that we live in.
Sorry, I was just going to say, Vince, I'd quite like to pick up on that point, because I think there is the reality of what AI can do or could do to jobs in the not too distant future. And then there's the perception and the concern. There are a decent number of people that are freaked out, rightly or wrongly, about their jobs. And so I'm curious, as a group of sort of corporate leaders and executives, how we think about messaging around this, how we think about talking about it. There is probably some need or desire to engage with this as a conversation, say, we are interested in this and how it could shape the future of our business. You don't want to look like a stick in the mud, but at the same time, you don't want, a third of your workforce to be, terrified that they might lose their jobs in 2 years, whether or not they will. Maybe Vince, starting with you, and then actually Jeff over here, we discussed this a little bit at our roundtable, so I'd like to go to you on this as well after we've heard from Vince.
I have a two-part comment to this. One is as pervasive as technology is, I guess there's a saying that goes, with technology everywhere, it is still the people who really make the difference. So that is going to continue, particularly at our levels for the foreseeable future, to make sure that we think about this, position this right, and map out appropriately what the roadmap should be for the organizations. Coming to those impacted and terrified about all of this, the situation that we are in currently is there's not enough being done about it. So when there is vacuum, there are all kinds of other perceptions and conclusions that come into play, and we need to begin to manage that and message that appropriately. We don't need to lie about it, but at the same time, begin to be very open and transparent about it. Even at the highest levels, we are still trying to figure out what does all of this mean to our business model, and what would the way we work and serve our clients look like a year or two from now. So being transparent about those kinds of things, and maybe even bringing them along the journey, is going to be very critical to how we handle all of this.
Yes, I'm Jeff Pfeiffer. I work with LexisNexis, so we're in the legal field together, and I would echo those comments. I think that the benefits to the working professional aren't clear yet. We're still in a very experimental phase where we're looking at where real value is created and whether that value manifests in cost savings or productivity gains, or in the legal field, we're talking a lot about capacity enhancers, things that would allow individuals, for example, that don't have access to legal services to be able to get access to legal services because lawyers can do more with their available time. But I agree completely with the comment that individuals, especially professionals who are very threatened by the developments in this technology space, need that experimentation opportunity to learn, fail, and then figure out where there's real benefit from the application of the technology.
And I mean, they need to be part of the conversation. I think what we've learned from the talent agency, especially as we're going through the past year, is you can't keep them out of the conversation. They're hearing the news cycles of this is going to disrupt everything. For the writers, it's going to completely replace their writers' rooms. For the talent, you're going to have the virtual avatars that do the entire thing for you. But having them part of a conversation, actually teaching them what is reality today, where things are going, and having a part of it, and trying to empower, trying to use the different pieces that you can potentially remove barriers for them, or give them tools that they themselves as creatives can use, are interesting. The point you brought up about the legal agencies, historically, there's been what I like to say is like hazing type of activities, where it's like when you're a paralegal, or as soon as you're getting into an office, you have to go through all the contracts, you have to do all this busy work, you have to do all this stuff to be able to learn how to be a lawyer, or to learn how to get your grind in. But in reality, do you? Can we remove some of those type of activities from the process and allow more people to get into the profession without those barriers?
I mean, can I just ask the show of hands, how many people here have actually implemented AI in a way that's changed their business? It's the generative AI. Okay, so like a third, I guess. So we're still in early innings in terms of what this really means.
Yeah, so I was thinking about that when we were just speaking. I think that especially within corporate America, which not too many people here are involved with corporate America, 80 to 90% of tech spend is really maintaining legacy systems. And, you know, while AI is the fastest tech spend in terms of growth, it's still a very small percentage in terms of what a corporate is focused on. And then, of course, you have regulated corporates also. So while AI could completely change how private wealth works, for example, it can choose what mutual funds you're invested in, it can generate personalized reports. I mean, what's the need of a financial advisor? That, like, JP Morgan's not doing that right now. That's not going to happen right now, and it's not going to happen for a while. So I think it's just, you have to put it a little bit in perspective in terms of timing. For these big companies. For the smaller, more internet-based companies, it's a little easier.
Definitely.
But you are seeing new jobs being created.
Yeah, like the ones I referenced, but a lot of those new jobs are a head of transformation, a head of AI and ML, or a head of product type role that's going to sort of speak through what AI can do for you, in a sense, within those large businesses. But it's early stages. Those are baby step jobs.
I would add the data science to that as well, because AI can do things faster, maybe cheaper, maybe better, but it's the quality of the data that matters at the end. As the age-old saying goes, garbage in, garbage out. So data science is becoming equally important, if not even more important, as a foundational piece that we all need to work on.
Yeah, I agree with Emmeline's point around the pace of change here. While on a macro level, it's happening very fast on kind of an individual, effect on a person's job. It's happening relatively gradually, and so I think anytime you have the specter of change hanging over you, it creates a lot of anxiety. And there's been these fears of large-scale job loss really went mainstream 6, 7, 8 years ago in AI, and in that time, what we've seen is people really, for the most part, have not used it to reduce workforces. There's been scant evidence of job loss. Unemployment's at a historic low right now, and so I think it's an okay conversation to have. But really, I think the fear is a little bit overstated. When you actually take an empirical view and look, there's been little evidence to suggest that large-scale job loss is occurring at all because of AI, and I think it's gonna, these systems are gonna roll out over time, very gradually. People are going to adapt to them, and it's going to be okay.
This is my personal take that overall labor employment number is a very big number that doesn't show all the things that's happening in different sectors and different levels of workforce. Like at the Journal, we report on a lot of layoffs.
But the layoffs is the Journal attributing layoffs to just AI, or is that the overall?
I think it's partly the acceleration of technology and partly this whole year of efficiency in tech, where there was like a scene that there was too much bloat.
Yeah, and that makes a lot of sense. And I think, Adam, what your team is doing around that middleware layer of that transition, I'd be interested to hear. How hard is that? Because from what I know with other big corporations, as you transition from external data to internal data, your ERP, your HRS, et cetera, it's a lot more difficult because the internal data is much messier. That's exactly right. And so, we work with a lot of really large enterprises, and it's easy for someone in the C-suite or a board member to go in and play with ChatGPT and immediately see the potential to apply it to their business. But actually doing that is very difficult. There's a lot of things you have to do, and it's something everyone's striving to do. But the getting it, like you said, getting it to hooked up to your internal data through some sort of typically RAG or retrieval automated generation, making sure that's all tuned properly, that it's performing well, that you know how it's performing, it's not hallucinating, it's not giving wrong answers. It just takes some work to get that all dialed in. And so what we're seeing is like the really fast movers are getting these applications into production in, let's call it, 4 or 5 months they can get their, a use case in production. I think more typical over time as we get more data is going to be, closer to a year from going from the drawing board into production, just because there's a lot of things you need to do to really kind of get it dialed in to using your valuable proprietary data and operationalizing it in the hands of people.
We have a couple of audience members with their hands up, so Jax, I'm going to hand over to you.
So, just to change a little bit, right? So, we've been talking about existing workforce. What about the incoming one? My kids, right? Our kids that are going to come in. How should we be thinking about this?
I still think they should, whatever they're passionate about, they should do. That hasn't changed. I think this whole thing about learning to learn is definitely true, but I also think that's been true for a long time. It's not, something that's new because of AI. I think, their job may look a little bit different, but it's still going to be fundamentally in an area they're passionate about. So I have 2 kids as well, and I think I'm definitely exposing them to concepts of AI. Like we play around with ChatGPT. They don't use it to do their homework, but we have used it to double check answers and things like that. But I think their jobs may look a little different, but if they're passionate about international politics or math or computer science, those jobs are still going to be there, I believe.
I think it's a really, really interesting question to think about the context in which all of this transformation is happening and the perceptions of work to begin with, right? We have an intergenerational workforce, Gen Z, I'm not sure if your kids fall into that category or if they're younger, but this idea of, Amber asked about the person who just wants to come into work, clock in, clock out, that worker paired with a Gen Z coworker, and it is incredibly hard to manage during this time of transition, during this time of efficiency. And so I've been thinking a lot about this with our clients, and it's really where it's leaning is this middle manager layer, this layer of that frontline manager and helping them bring them along on that journey, because this next generation of workforce does not want to come in and be told what to do. They want to be brought in and brought along on the journey. They want to be doing the innovation day, the hackathon, where they're getting to give ideas around how AI can transform their business and be a part of solving that problem, a part of creating that new workplace. And so I think the question of how do we address this is really with that middle manager layer, because the executives understand that and they see that and they understand it, but that middle manager layer needs to be brought along. They need to be communicated with, and they need to be a part of creating this.
I think it's a little bit like that analogy of all the horsemen used to deliver the mail, and what are we going to do about the horsemen, now that there's the car. I mean, I think a lot of different businesses will evolve into completely different businesses and completely different business models. So this idea of breadth, adaptability, that's going to be the theme for children.
Hi, I'm Rashmi Rao, and I have an observation and then a question. A lot of this conversation still seems to be very narrow in terms of an industry perspective. There are industries like where I am in healthcare, where doctors and nurses are leaving at an unbelievable pace, and we do not have the same number of people joining healthcare workforce. Renee yesterday talked about manufacturing. We're trying to bring manufacturing back to this country after 30 years, and there is just not an ecosystem to do that, no matter how many CHIPS Act and others we pass. And still, all of this conversation is centered around a very narrow sort of software middle manager kind of conversation. So how do we make sure the true value of AI reaches these industries that are really hurting for lack of workforce? So it is not a conversation about taking away their jobs. It's actually a conversation about how do we make sure the jobs get done.
I would actually challenge you a little bit on that, because when we're saying nurses and doctors are leaving at an alarming rate, I have a number of friends and family who are in that practice. It is because they are overworked. They are doing, Kosla made a joke about the APEC, which is a technology platform that a lot of hospitals are using, and it's a lot of manual entry. It's a lot of just work upon work rather than just doing their job. And the thing that I've always heard is I wish I could just be what I originally wanted to be, a doctor. I want to help people. I want to make them feel better. I want to be able to have an honest conversation with somebody and tell them. But now they have so many of these other things that they have to do that weren't a part of what they originally signed up for. So that's where I would say, what if AI was the thing that took those other pieces away so they don't want to leave in as alarming numbers?
Can I respond to that very quickly? The EHRs had the exact same argument 15, 17 years ago. And I would actually equate it to the housewife argument. I use it.
What's an EHR?
The electronic health records, the one that he was talking about. They added to the work, but 15, 17 years ago, the argument was they would reduce the burden, they would increase transparency, they would empower the patient. Deja vu, right? We're doing the exact same argument today. But I would equate it to the housewife argument. Like if you go back to the 1960s and 70s, vacuum cleaners, refrigerators, washing machines, same argument. It's not like I have more time, or women have more time, or house managers have more time today. It's not. We will always figure out what to do with time, so I don't think that argument is a valid argument.
Is anyone here from Microsoft? I mean, they're trying to sell Copilot to industries like yours and say, hey, we can help, but I guess you're a little skeptical. And I think that's one of the things I'm wondering about AI is all these companies are pouring so much money into making these products, and are people in healthcare or energy or other industries going to buy them?
Well, Jamie, I'm also interested in, who do you hire to help you implement these technologies? Who has the kind of technical skill set? Does that technical skill set exist? I was surprised to hear it during a couple of conversations during the last couple of days from people at pretty large companies that, they're looking at sort of 22-year-olds who have the skill set rather than sort of AI or machine learning engineers and developers with 15, 20 years experience. Adam, you run an AI startup. I'm curious about your view on this, like where you're finding the right people that have enough of an understanding of this very rapidly evolving technology.
Yeah, absolutely. It is a very new technology, and it is parts of it are the same as like the traditional AI, but there's also new skill sets. A lot of them talk about prompt engineering and things like that that are very new. And we do hire a lot out of university. And I think that's one thing that's important for machine learning AI in general is to have a really kind of healthy talent pipeline, have relationships with universities to really make sure you're tapped into that talent pool, because it is vital. And then, people are sort of, you kind of have to grow your own talent a little bit from that, the raw potential of a new graduate. But those people end up, if you can bring in some really talented people who are passionate early in their career about the technology and give them room to kind of grow and experiment, they can become really phenomenal contributors to your organization.
So those undergraduates, what are they majoring in? Just asking for a friend?
Yeah, I mean, some of them are coming from computer science degrees, but there's a lot more breadth now. The joke is, what's the hottest programming language in the world right now? English. And so we like a lot of like product people who may have been product managers before are now kind of making much more direct contributions to the building of the systems, because this technology is just a little more accessible than what AI has been in the past.
So are you just sort of agnostic on what people have studied, or what are you looking for in a hire?
Yeah, we still hire a bunch of people with technical degrees, but we also have people who kind of came in and product manager job families who maybe didn't had a much more diverse backgrounds. Like we have someone who went to his undergrad degree in education before taking some data science classes, who's actually turned into be a real kind of a huge contributor to our team. And just has that intellectual curiosity to really kind of dig in and iterate and really kind of get things dialed in. And so I think there's it opens it up a lot more broadly to people outside of traditional computer science type roles. And I mean, for us, it might sound crazy. We actually removed the requirement of a degree at all. So the folks, not only for that helps out with a lot of other barriers for diversity and broadening your voice, but some of the engineers I'm finding, I had mentioned, I find them on YouTube, and they're teaching how to do LangChain or Python, and they're really, really smart and whip smart, and they just are not through the traditional channels. And overall, for talent for the past 5 years, I think that's what we've had to do. You can't rely on the normal channels of how you're getting talent. You have to go to these more unique ways. One of my best data engineers, I found him on Reddit looking at a Power BI subreddit, and he is one of the most valuable people we have on our team right now.
Charles, do you DM these people on YouTube or Reddit? Like, how do you reach out to them once you go like, oh,
I slide in their DMs? No, usually it is. I'm interested in some topic, whatever it may be, just my own curiosity, and for the last one, it was somebody who was teaching LangChain on YouTube, and I figured out a way to get in touch with them, reached out. He's like, oh, that's so cool. Yeah, I would love to. And they're so excited. I think that's the key, is working with folks who are so excited for this, that they're learning. They're not going to be experts. They're not going to be 15 years in and say, oh, this is the same thing that's happened the last 5 years, 10 years, 15 years. They want to innovate. They want to learn.
And that said, if you look at, the LLM kind of creators at Google or Microsoft, they're looking at the PhDs in computer science, applied math, and stats.
So it's both. It's people who have a love of learning, have shown in curiosity, or have the degrees and the resume. How many people have tasked someone in their company to be in charge of AI for the company? Okay, not that many, but can you speak to like how you made that decision?
I just need a program.
Can you say who you are?
I'm Pete with Causeway Capital. I'm the CTO there. And it just seemed to us that these are initiatives that span the entire enterprise, so it needed a program oversight.
I mean, do you think that's a good approach, or is it more like, oh, everyone has to care about this?
I'll let you know in 5 years.
As I walk over,
Ben, sorry, Ian Hyatt with Purdue University. We had a few things in motion with it because of higher education. So there's the Institute for Physical AI, which was announced. But what do we do with it in reality? From the Office of the CIO, we have to have someone that can lead the effort, that has an awareness and understanding of the need for our students, but also the faculty. So we selected someone, strangely enough, who has been running our high performance computing for a very long time, a PhD, of course, right? But a new PhD, not someone who's been stayed in the industry for a significant period of time with that educational level. It's creating a lot of challenges. And one other thing I did want to mention, talking about the electronic health record, there's a concept around corporate memory, right? And we all know this, right? It's just like sales. What have you done for me lately? Corporate memory thinks about EHR and the value that it was supposed to add, but it doesn't remember that it was designed to eliminate a number of professional medical personnel and create cost savings as a result of the activity. That's something everybody lost. I was a CTO at a hospital system when it became a thing, and we brought in Epic. We've been talking about this last couple of days. And it was brought in, it spent a tremendous amount of money, but it reduced the overall expense line from a salary, wage, and fringe standpoint, with professional nurses and other positions that were eliminated as a result. So I just am always amazed at the corporate memory concept, right? If you live it, you know it, and if you don't, you think back and think about how it was supposed to be something that it was going to release time and make doctors more valuable. And honestly, that's not what happened for them in the medical profession. So.
Evelyn, I wanted to ask you kind of a follow-on question from that, which is, you source CIOs and CTOs for big companies. Do you think in 5-10 years time, every big company will have a chief AI officer, or half of big companies will have a chief AI officer?
I think it's already happening, but sorry if this is ringing, but I think that's already happening. But what does that mean for each company? That's very different, and what they're in charge of and what they're looking at. Part of that is analysis. What are we going to plug in and play versus what are we going to build ourselves? What can we do? What can we do with this legacy infrastructure? How quickly can we move? That's a lot of the role right now. But if you look at all the major search firms, everyone's starting to have an AI practice, if they don't already. A friend of mine who runs the AI practice at another search firm has 30 open roles right now. So that's probably more than most people right now, because it's been a little bit of a slow market in my market. So yeah, it's coming about.
But a follow-on question about that is, it's a very technical role that requires a certain technical skill set. So if you're screening candidates for a chief AI officer and you don't have that technical skill set, how do you get the assurance that this person has the bona fides to do what they say they can do? And at least maybe then I'd like to put that question to you as you think about hiring, because in the sort of AR VR space, this is also a relatively nascent tech space. And so how do you think about finding people that can do what they say they can do?
Well, I think for starters, our friend from Causeway Capital said that he put a kind of head of program management in, and that's essentially what a lot of corporates are doing right now. If you're going to look at a head of AI that's deeply integrated into AI, so for example, a startup I'm aware of who brought in a very senior person that does understand the ins and outs of LLMs and all things, the serious AI world. That person was paid probably $4 to $5 million inclusive of equity. If you're looking at a program manager in a corporate, then it's much more of a how are we going to roll this out type of role right now.
Do you think that $4 to $5 million actually helped? It was worth it?
I have no idea. It's a startup, so.
I think that's something that I've seen a lot lately is these chief AI officers, it's a salesy role. And it's the one who can go be on panels like this and really prop up. We are a innovative organization, and because we have a new chief AI officer, the amount of people reaching out for the new Netflix, I don't remember what the specific role was, but the internal rumblings were they were doing that for the buzz rather than actually solving a problem.
They got the buzz. Go ahead, Elise.
Yeah, I think this is an interesting question. I think your point around skills-based hiring about finding talent, because these are roles that are going to be critical to changing what we're doing as businesses and the transforming legacy to new ways of working. And I have a deep concern about the diversity of the talent that we have leading these efforts, the diversity of talent that we have making these decisions, and who's in the room. And we know so much about what happens when the systems that perpetuate data and analyses and all these things can have drastic impacts. We're seeing this in AI vision technology and implications on not just, can this sensor see my skin color when I try and wash my hands, but to life or death when it comes to policing and different ways these technologies are being used. And so I really do think about when we are recruiting for Praxis, how do we go outside of the normal bubble for folks who may not have had access to that Stanford PhD, but who've read a lot of those studies and who are building in the spatial world that Apple has released and are really curious and really interested in actually building some of the most innovative pieces of those applications. And so for me, I really think about not only what do we do at Praxis, but how do we talk about this more broadly in the field, because the decisions we make now will have implications on the population today, tomorrow, and most definitely in the next 10 years.
Elise, you started your career at IBM working on Watson, which, arguably, the kind of prior wave of AI hype. IBM now kind of advocates for companies to have, or certainly big tech companies that offer AI services and solutions, to have a kind of an ethics board or council to think about things like bias, unintended consequences. I wonder sort of what your view is on that. Should, in a few years' time, will sort of every company that is using AI need ethicists?
Yeah, I think it's something that we need to be thinking about. I think there's obviously regulation that could be happening at the federal level, but I think what we're seeing a lot is product inclusion, which often has some ethics-based components to it. And I think it really, yes, there should be an ethics board, but it should be something that we're building into our product managers and to our leaders, the ideas and these ways of thinking about mitigating bias and the tools and products we're building. It has to be something that it's too late if it's taken, we built the product, it's in the field and the ethics board is reviewing. By that point, it's already releasing and having an impact. And so what are we doing from the earliest stages of development to bring in different perspectives, to check the data set that we're using, to understand and really whiteboard what are the potential negative externalities of what we're about to build and what we're about to do, and how do we offset that? And is it worth offsetting, or should we actually go a different direction? These are the questions that our teams are dealing with right now. And because we see the diversity stats still, we do not have the diversity of the populations we're trying to serve in those rooms. And so how do we bring them in, and how do we build the skill set within our teams to begin to mitigate those biases? And we work with our clients on that every day. I'm curious what you all are seeing.
I actually fervently agree of right now. I feel whenever I hear about like code and ethics boards, it feels a lot more like the checklist, similar to checklist DEI. We just need to fill these different boxes, when in reality, it needs to start much, much earlier in the food chain. Having the diverse voices, but also empathetic voices. When we're talking about, yes, these technologies might replace humans or potential work, I want the people who actually would have empathy for them and find other ways to implement that and see value differently than just a P&L sheet. So if I were to say further up the food chain, or as we're getting that talent, it's not just from diverse places. It's not just from like Reddit or YouTube or anything. It's also the quality of the person themselves, not just on paper, but like their actual voice.
The last thing I'll say is I think there's a question around the power of those ethics boards. We've seen some transition of really thought-provoking and progressive AI and technologists leaving some of these large companies because they aren't being listened to, because they aren't being heard, and their opinions are not being embedded into what's being built. And so how do we think about, as a leadership team, as a board, what matters for our values, and how do we align what we're building and developing with that mission, with those values?
I completely agree with both of those comments. In addition to trying to form an ethics board, I would also emphasize that there are so many of us in our organizations who have that responsibility today, whether it is the Chief Diversity Officer, Chief Human Resources Officer, CIO, even the Office of the General Counsel, for example. So all of us need to be thinking about these kinds of things, and again, making sure that it starts from the inception of the idea and the development of that idea into a workable product. So fully agree.
I think Vinod also made an interesting point that if we could get it right, for everything you guys are saying, then these systems can reduce bias in the end.
Yeah, I do. Go ahead. So prior to starting Arthur, I started Capital One's AI team and scaled that up, and we spent a lot of time on these issues. And I definitely agree with the points around, it's not just the board's job; it's everyone's job to be aware of these issues. But the thing that gave us hope was when you're talking about bias, there's a lot of kind of manual, human-based processes that have a lot of bias in them. And when you move some of those sort of traditional processes to AI, it becomes it's a less threatening conversation to have. Like, it's not like, is this set of humans biased? It's like, is this algorithm biased? And it's a little more measurable and a little less personal. And so I do have some optimism. I'm not saying it's going to completely fix everything. There's still, systemic bias is really, it's so ingrained. But I do think there's a potential to kind of nudge things in the right direction if we take a really thoughtful approach as we, really kind of start to use algorithms and AI more.
I think we have time for one, maybe two more sort of audience questions, reflections, ideas. Does anyone have anything they'd like to put to the panel?
You all are too easy on us.
This has been really, really insightful. I'm curious, not to go too deep down the rabbit hole of the ethics and bias discussion without being overly educated on it. I'm curious, with folks who are starting in the AI space, starting new companies, who aren't necessarily contributing to the models directly, but we're harnessing them, what's something that we can keep in mind as we're building out our technologies and tools in relation to the discussion here? Like, if we're not having direct impact on the actual models, the algorithms per se, any suggestions there of how smaller companies can participate in that discussion?
I think one area, it depends on what industries you want to scale into, but I would just continue to keep privacy in mind, and also security, and also regulatory.
And one thing I would say is look at your data sets, the additional data sets that you're bringing on top. LLMs are LLMs, but like what we've seen with a lot of the recruiting apps and the biases that they have brought in and how bad that truly is, that's because the data sets that they're using aren't the problem. Like they aren't easily discernible. And so something that we had talked about in Hollywood is, could we have a more discoverable knowledge set that is free and open to all agencies, all studios, for finding talent that isn't through looking at the last 50 years of who the most talented people are, but looking in a much different way, because it's the data sets on top of the LLMs that are going to be what really change what the opportunities you have or the biases that you might be able to get rid of.
Yeah, I agree. And also I'll say like putting in smart guardrails. And so we have, just as an example, we have a client putting out an LLM system for HR, their HR team. And, they're putting in smart guardrails around, when is it appropriate to talk about like, you shouldn't be talking about a job candidate, whether they're pregnant or whether they have kids, and so putting in place those sort of guardrails so that kind of inappropriate questions or uses of the system aren't happening is a nice way, again, to nudge things in the right direction.
And I think like any sort of product development process, instead of releasing it writ large, start small, test, and see if there are equitable outcomes in what you're seeing with users and the populations you're serving in the industry you're in. And I think what we're seeing, though, is that sometimes these technologies are released much larger populations, and that is where we see, oh no, the impact's already happened. It's too late to catch and iterate and go back and look at the bias that's present in historical data sets.
Great. We have one more question here from Rashmi, but Rashmi asked a question earlier, so I want to make sure if anyone else would like to ask a question who we haven't heard from already, raise your hand now. If not, we will come to Rashmi. Speak now or forever hold your peace, I think is the phrase. Okay, Rashmi, over to you.
Thank you. I've been wanting to ask this question from day one, and it just feels like a smaller panel, so I feel comfortable asking.
We won't tell.
This is about legacy, heritage, in maintaining our historical accuracy. And they always say history, the war is won by the person that wrote history. And with AI now, one of the concerns I have is there is nobody talking about doing the same kind of preservation or heritage sites, like the physical sites that we've taken so much care to preserve for generations to come so they can learn about it. I don't see us, I don't know, maybe I'm just ignorant, but I don't see any effort. Is it a nonprofit? Should it be a government? I come from the beautiful Pacific Northwest, which is, has so much indigenous heritage and legacy and land. I just wonder what is going to happen, and if you guys have a point of view.
Are we just getting too digital as a society and not paying attention to the...
Yes, there is nobody paying attention to folklore, maintaining folklore as a heritage. And I think we've already lost a lot of it as we moved into digital transformation. And if every knowledge, if this AGI is supposed to be kind of the lowest common denominator of all knowledge in the world, and we have not paid attention to actually bring other knowledge, how is it the lowest common denominator, and what happens to the other parts? We've done this, right? We have heritage sites, we have, even national parks and forests. We've taken the effort to intentionally preserve them so that they don't get lost for the future generations. How are we going to do that with AI? Is anybody doing it?
We've actually seen some really fascinating use cases of people applying AI to that exact problem to actually accelerate our understanding. And so just an example, we partnered with Harvard University on a project a few years ago where they were using computer vision they have this really kind of priceless photo archives from the late 1800s and early 1900s around a lot of Syria and parts of the Middle East that have unfortunately, a lot of the archaeological sites have been damaged by all the conflict there. And they're using computer vision to analyze it, look for patterns, and work that used to take postdocs, years to complete, cataloging all the images can now be done in hours. And so their understanding of, kind of the heritage of those countries has been accelerated by AI and really kind of it's helped advance our understanding of a lot of those cultures. And so there are actually some pretty inspirational stories of AI being used to help bolster our understanding of our heritage.
And there's a lot of archivist organizations out there that have newspapers going way, way back. And until AI was here, theoretically would have to go through the same physical process of pulling up that newspaper from 1973 to see what happened in Boulder, Colorado at that time. When hopefully with AI of what we were seeing, of you can rapidly adopt that so that that knowledge wouldn't be lost. And how do we broaden that out even further to not just newspapers, not just pictures, but maybe local records, and make it easier for the elementary school that you grew up to have all their things pulled into that, but in a safe and safe way that's not going to have very unintended consequences. As soon as I said elementary school, I got nervous. But I think there's amazing opportunities now with very little effort too.
I think people build for what they know, and so how do we continue to give tools to underrepresented communities and underestimated communities to ensure that they're able to tell their own stories, they're able to build products and services leveraging this technology that elevates their heritage and their experience and the diversity and perspectives that they bring. I think we talked about the impacts of social, like all of the social media that we have, but we also have seen some positive impacts from social media for underrepresented communities to tell their stories, to have their voices heard and elevated. You can kind of go back and forth on that and whether there's bias and all of the algorithms, all those things, but I think what my hope is that we're able to continue to invest in communities so that they're able to build and tell their stories and their voices and their heritage is elevated.
And in most cases, there are two ways of thinking about it. One is what we really want to preserve is the information, the memories, and anything that can be educational from the way things used to be. And that has been happening for quite some time. I mean, in my own context, for example, there was a time when all kinds of legal records would be maintained in boxes in warehouses, which people would have to bring it in and wait for 2 days for that process to work, for them to find what they're looking for. Today, everything is digitized. So the search becomes much easier. The access to that information is almost immediate. So those kinds of evolutions will continue, and hopefully we all would agree that they should continue. But if you're talking about the physical presence of a particular site or a culture or some of those kinds of things, yeah, those have to be thought through quite separately.
Final question for the panel, just picking up on something Elise mentioned. Adam, I'd like to start with you and then work our way around. So I'm giving you a heads up that I'm picking on you first. As is often the case in conversations about AI, we focused a lot on risks and concerns, which I think is appropriate with innovation at this scale. But this is a town hall on technology talent. I'd like each of you in 20 to 30 seconds to say what you're most excited about as it relates to AI, the intersection of AI and talent.
Yeah, I think the intersection of AI and talent, really it's just like we talked about earlier, things are changing so quickly. And so really the opportunity to work with new people, to understand collectively a new type of technology, which is generative AI, and how to harness it, is just fascinating because I think everyone is in this together. When you see teams come together, they're all trying to learn and really kind of crack the code together. And it's just a really stimulating time to be in the technology field.
Well, now I'm biased because I'm going to say what I'm most excited about is what we're doing at Praxis Labs and leveraging Gen AI to help people become more human. We're using generative AI to help do personalized feedback at scale for organizations with hundreds of thousands of people, and how they can better give feedback across difference, how they can better bring in new perspectives, how they can de-escalate tension in meetings, make decisions that create more equity and inclusion for all. And so for me, it's about using the technology in a way that makes us all more connected, all more human, and better able to produce outcomes that create more value for all of us.
Yeah, I think what I'm most excited for aren't necessarily all the revenue generating products that we keep talking about and that we're concerned and have for code and compliances. It's also the opportunity for using AI for good, for removing barriers, for reducing barriers, making it easier for underrepresented voices and those to not just replace somebody who's currently in a role, but completely change a role, or make it easier for them to own their entire, like what we've seen with the creators and influencers, own their entire pipeline, not have a ulterior voice or somebody that is able to change their narrative, that they can actually do that. And hopefully not all value has to be revenue value when it comes to AI. There can be a lot of value that I think boards are starting to see outside of just the top line, bottom line.
Well, for me, it is the all of the possibilities, the better world that is often talked about, and even the access and the leveling of the field to some extent that can come out of this, as Vinod was talking about yesterday from his own personal experience of having to travel just to be able to read a magazine, for example. Hopefully those kinds of things will not exist anywhere in the world that we are moving to. And the prospect of all the transformation that I get to be part of and get to lead within a very prestigious global firm is exciting in itself. Certainly there is some element of concern associated with it, but the possibilities are very promising.
I'd say when I started in this business, IT was really called IT and it was back office. And I think what's exciting about it is now it's much more, companies are much more product oriented, technology first. And I think that creates a different type of technology executive. So that's been pretty interesting to be around and watch that evolve. And in the meantime, I hope AI doesn't take over all of recruitment and I still have a job in a few years.
I'm very passionate about impartial, financially informed, financially sophisticated journalism and its role in society. And I hope that, and yet it's not super lucrative business. Journalism is a low margin industry. So I hope that AI can help us reduce costs so we could keep doing what we're doing and keep doing it at a higher and higher level. We spend a fair amount of time doing things that a computer could do, and that would give us more time to do the important journalism we believe in. Thank you all so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.